So when our next guest was the CEO of GE, the annual employee healthcare bill was over $3 billion. That was more than the company spent on steel. I don't know what that number is, but it seems like a lot. So that's when he realized employee healthcare had to be one of their biggest concerns, and now he's focused on collective health and changing the landscape of healthcare, how employers can shift gears and take on more responsibility themselves. The truth is, and he's here to talk about this in greater detail, no matter what business you're in, you are in the healthcare business. Please welcome to the stage Jeff Immelt with Fortune's Alan Murray.
Jeff, thank you so
Alan,
much.
good to see you again.
Good to have you here.
Good to be here.
We're not going to talk about GE today.
Good.
Are you okay with that?
I'm fine with that. There's been plenty of news, so yeah.
So we're going to talk about something you wrote recently where you said today every company is a healthcare company. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think, I had a unique perspective because I ran a big healthcare company, and I also, as a legacy company, had a tremendous role as a payer. And so I've been around the healthcare industry for probably 25 years. I would say, Alan, that one of the failures in the US healthcare system is that employers just haven't been very good purchasers of healthcare. And as it's grown in expense over time, the extent to which employers can be part of this context, actually run it like a business inside their company, I think that's going to be one of the catalysts of the next generation in terms of how real change gets made.
But for a long time, what I was hearing from employers were, we don't want this job. We don't want to have to do this. Let's figure out a better way to do this so it's not our responsibility.
Look, I mean, I think it's easy to kind of say that, and maybe to some a single payer system would be a relief valve. I'm not sure that it's necessarily better for employees, and in the end, it doesn't allow you to differentiate yourself. But I would say more broadly, Alan, look, I had been a long-term employee of the company. During the financial crisis was the first time I'd really given a serious look to how much we were spending on employee healthcare costs. At that moment, it crested above $3 billion. It was slightly less than what we earned in our business, which I thought was kind of ironic in that context. It had grown by 7% over the last 25 years. And so if a relatively big company only does that well as a purchaser, there's something that's just fundamentally broken, right? And so that's when we really embraced, I'd say, a series of changes which can actually move the needle, but you have to be willing to take some risk, and it has to be led by the CEO.
Move the needle on cost, but also on quality?
Look, I mean, I'd say that it starts like every business adventure by having metrics. Your consultant or let's say your insurer might tell you that a metric is like cost avoidance or something like that. That's not a metric you would allow anybody else in your company to ever use. So we established metrics of like net promoter score,
yeah,
cost per employee, and absenteeism, because we had a large blue-collar workforce. And absenteeism turns out to be a really good metric for quality, right? And we watched those things, I'd say, Alan, go down, right? And some of it's, quite, I would say, crude, and by going to kind of high deductible plans and things like that. Some of it's awareness inside the company. Some of it's better negotiating and things like that. But, we basically started from a relatively low point. A company like ours, low to high from a city standpoint, is plus or minus 50% on cost per employee. So let's say in 2010, the low cost would have been, let's say, $9,000 per employee per year. The high city would have been $16,000 or $17,000 per employee per year. Same cohort, right? Same age, same profile. So that's what you're dealing with, is a system that's got huge frictional cost and huge variation, kind of city by city. Look, I've had, I ran our business in the late 90s. When you have a conference like this, Alan, the therapies in the U.S. healthcare system, from a cancer or an orthopedic standpoint, have been transformed in the last 25 years. We still spend 20% of the healthcare dollar on administrative costs, right? I would come to a conference like this in 1997. Most of the discussions are more or less the same. Should we do single payer? Like who's, disjointed metrics and who pays and stuff like that. So in many of the, kind of very central ways, things haven't changed that much.
It's funny you say that because you're now executive chairman of Athena Health. And Jonathan Bush, the CEO, was on this stage, I think 2 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And there were a bunch of conversations like the one you just heard about cool technologies that have the potential to transform healthcare. And he said, hold it, everybody. We're dealing with, as you said, administrative problems, reading doctors' prescriptions, making sure people don't take conflicting drugs. We're blocking and tackling and dealing with basics. It's a long time before we can get to transformative therapy.
Look, I'd say AI, amazing. AI has got amazing potential for healthcare. Let me give you 2 use cases that I'm not sure you talked about this week. Sending a good bill. Okay, so if you look at a CPT code and how many dollars are hung up on a provider's balance sheet because the government rejects the payment because of one digit on CPT code, classic machine learning. That's number one. Number two, X-ray. The X-ray machine was invented in 1915, so it's more than 100 years old. There's still 4 or 5% retakes on X-rays. So let's solve those two, and then we'll cure cancer after that, right? Well, but let's solve.
That's actually a little depressing.
Let's solve 2 things that are right in front of us. And I think that's where people get lost in healthcare, is applying the tools to the most fundamental use cases that are really going to make a difference. So I think we're back to maybe 6 or 7% inflation, really measured inflation, which I consider to be per employee, per unit, and that's probably unsustainable over the long term.
But you're also working as a partner at NEA. You're involved with a lot of venture companies. You must see a lot of these exciting new technologies that are coming.
So the ones I like, Alan, so there's all kinds of, and again, you're going to see them here this week, all of these great biotech and immunotherapy, and these are amazing, and there are people that are, kind of smarter than I am that can go through those. The 2 places that interest me the most are kind of what I would call tech-enabled services and the way employees buy their healthcare. Tech-enabled services, the favorite company that I like to study is Uber, because half of it's an operating company, half of it's a platform. And I think to be effective in services and healthcare, you need to be able to capture the technologies of automation or AI, but you have to be able to deliver them as a unit of one. City by city, hospital by hospital, doctor by doctor, and you have to be able to differentiate as a unit of one. And it's the reason why some of the, let's say the mega AI companies haven't been that successful, is because to be good at this, you have to have a brain and a body, right? You have to be able to deliver it. It's just the nature of fragmentation in the industry. And the other one is to crack into, and what Collective does, is all about the employer healthcare market. Because again, it's $1.2 trillion. It's not been done, there are people that have been known to be efficient in all the other things they do, who by and large aren't efficient in this one practice. And it's complicated. It's because they don't want to disrupt their employees. It's because maybe their HR leader isn't strong enough to want to push it through the system. There's all kinds of reasons in terms of why it gets avoided, but it gets avoided.
It's much more about culture than it is about technology.
Look, I mean, I think the technology exists to do this. If you're talking about the ability to use data, to have transparency, to be able to see what a good bill looks like. I mean, if you're in a hospital or you go to the doctor, being able to dissect a bill is huge, and that's what companies like Collective Health are doing. But it really just, if every CEO in the country would stand down for like 2 days and actually have their benefits people up on the C-suite talking about how do benefits actually happen, how does contracting actually happen, which insurance companies are doing well, which are doing it poorly, what do my employees really feel. That, as much as anything else in our ecosystem, would change the direction of healthcare.
You think you can get that to happen?
Again, everybody reaches their own, it's like the boiling frog,
Yeah.
3 billion just to me seemed like
That's
a lot
big
of money.
number. Not everybody has that big a number.
It was bigger than steel. You sit there and say, which dummies did this? And then you realize the dummies actually you look at in the mirror every morning, right? It's what I allowed to have happen. And it wasn't like the team was actually benefiting from a lot of this. They were dealing with the same complexities. So I think, you and I were talking about it earlier. I kind of teach a class at Stanford Business School, and I always try to, for the young folks, give them, here are like 4 or 5 things you're going to be working on the rest of your life, probably, right? I put China on that list. I put, kind of future of work, how's workforce, healthcare is right on the list because, look, we're going to be above 20% of the U.S. GDP. Every person in our society as an American is going to be working on healthcare for the rest of their life. So in some ways, Alan, it's one of those things where we're almost never early, but you're almost never too late in this industry just because there's so many things that remain to be fixed. And employers are a particularly powerful group that hasn't used any of their abilities to be able to change the nature. And look, I mean, I love Jamie and Warren and Jeff. They're great people, but you can't just declare it and have it be. You got to take like 1,000 actions have to go with this in order to make it happen.
And it's not just an opportunity, it sounds like it's a responsibility.
I think it's an opportunity. It's one of those things that's going to be embedded in everybody's competitiveness as time goes on. But I also think we can deliver better benefits for the people that work with us. I think, I'm firmly convinced that there are aspects of mental health and some other systemic health issues that don't even enter the equation because we're just getting deluged by phony expenses and a bunch of other areas that just chew up the same dollar.
I want to change the topic just a little bit because Peter Sands from the Global Fund for AIDS, Malaria, Tuberculosis, he's sitting out there somewhere. The lights are too bright. I'm not sure exactly where he is, but he was on the stage yesterday and he talked about how these are big, troublesome diseases that can be cured, and the corporations have a big role in it. But that they did a study that showed 75% of companies now have a climate change action policy, but only 10% have a global health policy. You were instrumental in getting companies to that 75% point on climate change. I mean, in 2007, US cap was a big change. Do you think he's right about the need for the change?
Well, look, I think I would broaden the, first I love Peter, and I think he's great. It's great to have him working on this. I think my own experience in emerging markets and things like that would say to me that the technology is actually catching up with the need. And you can actually change the parameters of these diseases in a really meaningful way. We had tried as part of the Millennial Challenge to develop an ultrasound because one of the worst parts of the Millennial Challenge was breech birth. So we wanted to do an ultrasound that could just do wand, just take a midwife and a wand and say red or green. Turned out a decade ago that cost $20,000 to do just because it was so hard. Now you can do it for $1,000, right? So the technology changes in what you can do. I would just add to that. Over the course of my career, we gave money to 2 big not-for-profits inside the US. One was secondary education for the purpose of teaching STEM to inner-city high schools. And the other one was community health, right? So those 2 things. I can tell you after 35 years of watching, I'm not sure, despite all the great efforts we had, I'm not sure we ever moved the needle on secondary education. It is so hard and so complicated, but there wasn't one inner city clinic that we gave money to that didn't do better because of it. So I would just add to the point to say, emerging health, community health, developing health, not only is the need there, but I actually think you can move the needle faster there than you can in climate and all these other things.
Jeff Immelt, thanks so much.
Good to see you again.
Great to have you
Thanks.
here.
Good to see you guys. Thanks. Good to see you, Alan.